For this session, I thought we'd talk a little bit about figuring out keys and scales when you have to improvise over a chord progression, whether it's over a backing track or you're playing with a band or whatever it is, you need to know the scale you're playing in. And if you're like some players, your theory might not be as important to you as it should be. But that's okay because we're not going to talk too much about theory today. We're going to talk mostly about your ear, and we're going to look at a very important element of music that's going to help you in any situation, any musical situation, whether it's really simple chord progressions or more complex. And it all has to do with the fact that musical elements need to match each other. When I say they need to, that's an absolute rule, but music is not only absolutes. Obviously, you can break those rules. I'm going to use some generalizations in my mini lesson here, but just know that we can break the rules. I have nothing against that. But if we follow the following rules, we're going to sound the most melodic for most people out there. So if you want to appeal to most people, these are the rules that you need to follow. So when I said matching the elements, that means that you probably do that already if you've been playing for a little while. It means that if you have a minor chord, you're going to use a minor scale. If you have a major chord, a major scale. And so that's what I mean by matching the elements. If you don't, things might clash, and you might have this type of sound where two notes are really close to each other. And when notes are really close to each other, it's hard for the human ear to distinguish them. And that can create confusion and clutter. So we want to space things out. So let's talk a little bit about that. And we're going to start with something very basic that you should do if you're not doing it. And that's taking a chord and finding the relative pentatonic, the matching pentatonic to that chord. If we have a major chord, and I've got a looper here, I'm going to press buttons, and that's basically going to record. I'll press it again, and it's going to loop it over and over so I can play over that. But let's say that we have a major chord, an E major. So it's going on over and over. That's a major chord. Therefore, I'm going to pick a major pentatonic scale. I'll talk a little bit about why in a second, but just keep that in mind. Major chord, major pentatonic scale. Minor chord, let's take a D minor chord. A minor pentatonic scale. If I selected over that minor chord major pentatonic scale, things will clash a little bit, and you'll have that effect that where two notes are too close to each other, and it might sound something like this. It doesn't quite work. That's a major pentatonic as opposed to the minor. Okay, so why does that work so well? We need to look a little bit to the theory side of things. I'm going to walk you through this. If it's above your head, just try to follow along. Lost my pick, throwing picks. I'll try not to make it too complex, but just follow along, and I think it's going to make sense. So we're looking at why a major chord would work with a major pentatonic and why a minor chord would work with a minor pentatonic. And before we do that, before I forget, I'm going to lower the monitors here. They're a little too loud for me. Okay. we need to look at the construction of scales. Every scale has a formula, a construction, a way that the notes are organized, and that's kind of the fingerprint of a scale. That's what gives each scale a different flavor. That's what differentiates one scale from the other. That's the formula of a scale. And again, I'm going to make a broad statement here. It's not always true, but for the purpose of simplicity, we will just pretend that that's always the case. There's always exceptions. But there are 6 scales. So I know it's not true, but let's pretend there's 6 scales. 3 of them are major, 3 of them are minor. And those 6 scales really are the most commonly used scales. So depending on the genre of music, but let's consider that we're talking about modern, Western music, rock, blues, funk, those kind of styles, even metal. Those 6 scales are going to be helpful, and your most chord progressions in all these modern styles of music are going to fit these different scales. 3 of them are major, 3 of them are minor. Let's take a look really quick. And again, don't worry if you're completely lost. It's going to click in a second. We're going to take a look at the 3 major types of scales. Those major types of scales are going to work on a major chord. I'm going to play them starting from the same note, A in this case, and I'll play them one after the other. The first one is called the major scale, or it has another name, the Ionian mode, or the Ionian scale, same thing. Here's that scale. It's got 7 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay? And I could repeat these notes over and over and over, and so forth. But it's the same 7 notes repeated over and over. That is one of these major scales, the Ionian mode or the major scale. Another one is the Lydian mode or the Lydian scale, and this is how it sounds. So we've got the major scale, the Lydian mode. And the third one is the Mixolydian. It sounds like this. Do you hear the difference? Probably not, because they're very close. If I play them one after the other faster, it's really hard to differentiate them from each other. The Ionian, Lydian, Mixolydian, they all work on a major chord. They sound very close. Why is that? Because if I look at the formula of each of these 3 different modes, they have notes in common, especially if you start them from the same note. That's where you can really hear the common notes between them. And these common notes have different names. Those are interval names. Intervals are just the way that we use to differentiate, to measure the distance between 2 notes. And if I look at these intervals, I will find that if I wrote down all the intervals of the Ionian mode, I'd have 7 intervals: a root, major second, major third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, major sixth, major seventh. And if I did the same thing with the next one, which is Lydian, I'd have another series of intervals. It would be slightly different because they're different scales. And same with the Mixolydian, I'd have other sets of intervals. But we would see, if we did that these 3 modes have 5 notes in common. So this is where I want to draw you back in. If you've been lost, just come back in. This is what you need to remember. The 3 scales that we can use over a major chord have 5 notes in common. Therefore, if you're not quite sure how to play these 3 different scales, all you need to do is memorize 5 notes, and you basically know more than half of the notes of these 3 very important scales. And if we analyze these 5 notes, we will find that we have a root, major second, major third, fifth, and major sixth. And that scale is the major pentatonic scale. So flashback to the beginning of this little course here, my little talk. I said that on a major chord, you can use a major pentatonic scale. Now you know why. Because we said that on a major chord, there are 3 options, 3 different scales that will work over a major chord. And if you don't know how to play these 3 7-note scales, all you need to know is to know 5 notes, the major pentatonic scale. So if you want to be safe, any major chord, replace it with a major pentatonic scale. It will work. In the same way, if we look at the minor scales, there are 3 minor scales that are used on minor chords. Again, if you just joined us and you're offended by what I said and you think that's not true, you're right. It's not true, but I'm just generalizing to make it easier. But let's say that there are 3 minor scales that work over a minor chord. If we compared the formulas of these 3 different minor scales, we'd see some notes in common. These 3 scales are Dorian, and I'll play that in A, Phrygian, Aeolian. They're very close, right? Your ear, if it's not really tuned and used to those different intervals, is going to think that I can't hear the difference because 5 notes over 7 are common. So I was just in essence playing 5 notes, the same exact notes, and 2 of these additional notes were changing. That's it. Really quick, Dorian, Phrygian, Aeolian. It's really hard to differentiate them. But if we wrote the formulas of these 3 modes, the Dorian formula, the Phrygian formula, the Aeolian formula, we would find 5 notes in common, 5 common intervals. These intervals are root, minor 3rd, perfect 4th, perfect 5th, minor 7th. And if you've been playing a few weeks, lead guitar, this sound should remind you of something. It should sound really familiar. The minor pentatonic scale. So that's why when you hear a minor chord, you could play a minor pentatonic scale. Because the minor pentatonic scale is extracted from the 3 minor scales that you can use over a minor chord. Only 3 options for the major, only 3 options for minor. Hope that makes sense. Always exceptions, remember that. But we're going to simplify it that way. Okay, so what does that mean for us who wants to improvise freely over a chord progression this time? Because the chord progression involves more than 1 chords. There are 2 main types of chord progressions. There are the chord progressions that are extracted from the same scale, meaning that all the chords fit a common scale. That's easy for us. But there are also the chord progressions that involve 2 or more different keys. And that's a little more complex, but there are tricks around it. But in essence, we just need to remember that chord progressions, are all tied to 1 or more scales. And we saw that minor chords are tied to minor scales. Major chords are tied to major scales. Minor chords are tied to the minor pentatonic scale. Major chords are tied to the major pentatonic scale. So, most of the time, you'll be able to hear if the chord progression is extracted from the same key or a different key. Let me play a few examples. I'm going to tune real quick. I'm not sure I'm completely tuned. And I'll play 2 types of chord progressions. I'll start with the chord progression that is, well, actually, I won't tell you what it is. If it's extracted from just 1 scale or multiple ones. I want you to hear the difference. And if you think I'm being rude and not watching you, I'm just watching my tuner. I'm also rude. No, I'm not. Okay. Here we go. All right, so I'll play a first chord progression. Go something like this. Okay, that is 1 chord progression. Try to remember how it made you feel. Do you think it's from 1 key or multiple keys? I don't know. That's how it sounded like. Here's another one. I'm going to start the same way. give you a different type of feeling. You heard that, hopefully, that there is something happening, especially in the second chord progression. That something happening is called a modulation. You change keys in the same chord progression. Do you hear it? I hope you did. When it sounds predictable, when things sound in harmony and melodic and everything works together, nothing comes as a surprise, it's in the same key. Here's another example. I got something like this. Everything works together, right? Just two chords, but there's no surprises, as opposed to as multiple scales. Okay, so how do we use what we learned about the pentatonic scales? We use it this way. I'm gonna record a quick vamp here. With two chords. I'll do an A major and an E major. I'm going to loop that. So that's going to go on and on and on. And if you're in a situation where you have to be the lead player on the spot, just ask whoever's playing the chord, hey, what's that chord? A major. And then he'll go on. The next one is E major and so forth. You're just locking into that A major. A major chord, A major pentatonic. Okay? So that'll work. A major pentatonic will work over a major chord. And here I played that major pentatonic only on the corresponding major chord. I don't have to if I know that the chord progression is in the same key. If it's in the same key, you're safe to play the same pentatonic scale over and over all the chords, because those chords are extracted from the same scale, and therefore any note you play is going to be from that scale, and it's going to work on all the chords. In this case, how did that make you feel? Did you feel that there was a modulation, a change of keys? Or does that come as an expected chord? There's nothing weird there. And hopefully you answered that there's nothing weird there. It's harmonious, it works, it's melodic, and it's from the same scale. We don't know the scale, we don't need to know. We just need to know one chord, A major. Most of the time it's going to be the first chord, and you just play that major pentatonic scale. It's going to work. Okay, so that works. But we know that it works because there are three types of major scales. From these major scales, we extracted a simpler scale, a 5-note scale, the pentatonic scale, and we know that some notes are missing. 2 notes are missing, right? We extracted the pentatonic scale, the major pentatonic. 2 are missing. We don't know which ones. And there are several ways to approach this, but I want to give you a very simple way to do it. As you're playing, you can either look at the other guitar player or ask, or you'll hear the next chord. You'll gather pieces of information in your ear that'll kind of give you a clue as to what the next chord is. In this case, it's E. I don't need to do all the theory stuff to figure out that this chord progression is an Ionian or Lydian or Mixolydian. You don't need to. All you need to do is, as you're kind of cruising along your major pentatonic scale, regardless of the position. So if I'm in this slice of the fretboard, that's what I'll use. If I'm in this one, that's what I'll use. It doesn't matter. But focus on one area of the fretboard. I'm going to use this one right here. I'm going to play my A major pentatonic. And my ear kind of told me that the next chord is E major. So I'm going to try to find an E major in that zone of the fretboard, an E major chord. And if you don't know how to play that, just play an open E major. That's okay. But I'm gathering that the next chord, which is E major, can be played right here in that zone of the fretboard. And mentally, I'm going to visualize some of the notes of that position and blend them in my major pentatonic scale. One by one, I'm going to do that. Some notes are going to be common. But others are going to be new notes, and that'll give you clues as to what are the missing notes. In other words, you've got your starting pentatonic scale, major pentatonic for a major chord, minor pentatonic for a minor chord, and then add the additional notes that are on the next chords, and that will help you. So in this case, if we go back to our loop, I've got my major pentatonic scale, and that slice of the fretboard, followed by an E major, which gives me clues as to which notes I need to add. And if I blend both together, I'll have the full scale, which in this case happens to be the Ionian mode. So it all has to do with matching the pentatonic scales and knowing your chords. If you blend both elements together, that's going to give you the full scale. I hope that made sense, and I hope I didn't lose people too much. This is definitely interactive, so if we have questions, I'm happy to take them. And if not, I'll give you another example. But
we've got plenty of questions, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Start hitting these. We have one from David Salkin. How long should one be practicing in terms of per week? I can only do 30 minutes a day. Is 1 hour every other day better or something else?
It's a great question. I think 30 minutes a day is great. It's really good. Music and guitar and whatever form of art that you want to get better at, I think it's better to have consistency. It's much better to have 30 minutes every day rather than an hour every other day, because you are, especially in those, well, actually, I don't know. I don't know how long you've been playing. Maybe you've been playing for a long time. But actually, at any level, you want to assimilate the information that you're getting, like whether it's a piece of theory or a lick or a technique, and you need to repeat it over and over so that it's embedded in your fingers. Just like when we're talking, I don't have to think about the way that I place my tongue in my mouth to produce a sound. It just comes out. Same with music. That's your ultimate goal, to speak musically. So I think a little bit every day is much better than an hour every day. And that's going to depend, too, on the quality of your practice. If you have 30 minutes just playing in front of the TV, then that's going to help you consolidate some of the things that you've learned. You're going to be really good at mechanical movements, but you're never really going to learn something new. So that's beneficial. Playing in front of the TV has its benefits to consolidate those things that you're learning. But I think I would much rather have you spend 30 minutes of really dedicated practice where you're working on a specific goal, learn how to use a particular scale or a technique, and really focus on that. So focused practicing. I have a practice guide somewhere on JamPlay. It's an article that I did a while back, but it's in the archive. So if you're a member, you can definitely check that out.
Okay. From John L. Is it better to play scales within a given key, or do you play scales behind individual chords?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I don't think it's a matter of better or worse. Those are two methods that can be used to help you organize your thoughts, but it's just a method to organize your thoughts. It's not going to help you reach that ultimate goal, which is just to speak. And if I hear a chord progression like this, for example, I'll try to create a quick groove in E or something. And I'll overdub that with a simple, funky type of thing. Sorry, my looper is kind of like acting up. I'll try that again. I'll overdub that. It's acting up. Anyways, your ultimate goal is to just listen inside and sing melodies and licks and be one with what you're playing. And almost as you're playing, but you're listening at the same time. So to answer your question, pick one and go with it because they all blend together in the end and it comes to the same. Hope that helped.
All right. From Danny J. Johnson, is it true that most rock and roll tunes do not follow the rules?
Good question, too. I don't know that it's true. I think it follows rules, but maybe not rules that are from the classical world, especially if we talk about the pentatonic blues scale, the blues scale, which is a scale with an additional note in there, the passing tone, it's a note between the fourth and the fifth. It follows its own sets of rules, but I think I don't know where you heard that, but I think it's coming from the fact that in rock, blues, and those kind of chord progressions, remember I told you earlier that you want to match the elements? Well, you don't really match the elements always in blues. Like there's an additional rule in the blues world where on a major chord, you can play a minor scale. So you pick from the minor world over a major chord. That will create a clash between the major third and the minor third. That'll create that sound, which we talked about earlier, the cluster. But our ears are so tuned to it that it sounds almost okay. Here's a demonstration. Here's a major chord. That's a major chord, right? An A7 chord. Normally I would use a major pentatonic scale or a major scale on that. And that works, right? But in the blues, you would pick the minor pentatonic scale over that. That doesn't work, but in context, now if you blend both together, that major pentatonic with the minor pentatonic, hope that made sense. So it's true that it doesn't follow the classical rules, but it still follows rules, its own set of rules.
James Nichols, I noticed your guitar has 24 frets. Do you use all of them?
It depends on the job. When I play every day, I rarely go higher than the the 17th fret. But usually when I would play those really high frets would be for overdubs. If I'm trying to harmonize something, if I've got a part that is something like this. For example, I'm recording a song that's part of the solo, and I want to harmonize that. I could use that in a song maybe to harmonize that, but not in every day. And so if you're behind that question was, should I buy a guitar that has 24 frets? Not necessarily. Just use what you have. And so no, not all the time.
From Robert Moyle, how do you make notes sound perfectly clear when soloing?
I think it's a combination of the right hand and the left hand. And it has to do with muting adjacent strings. So if I've got a note on the 3rd string, 5th fret, for example, right now I'm playing clean, so it's going to sound clean. But let's say there's a lot of distortion around. Then if I hit a space on the guitar that is not intended to be heard, that's going to be amplified. You're really going to hear it, especially if there's delay. So I would do this. Whenever I'm playing a note, my index is always pretty much flat on the neck. I remember for the first few years of playing, my fingers were really straight on the neck because I thought, well, my teacher told me to do it that way, but I found out quickly that that's not the best way to mute. So my index is always flat because when I'm hitting a note, putting pressure on a note, I'm using this part right here. It's not the complete fingertip, but it's a little bit below the fingertip. That's where I put contact with the string. And what that does is allow me to use the actual fingertip to slightly touch the next string. So if I'm aiming to hit the 3rd string, 5th fret, my index is flat because the fingertip is actually touching string number 4. Which is not the string that I'm fretting, but it's touching it slightly so that if by accident that string is still ringing because of a previous part or whatever, it's stopped because if I play that, it's muted because of my index. And it's always like that. If you look at my index, it's always pretty much flat. Always flat like that because of that. And I'm also using right here below my finger to mute all the other strings that are below. So if again I'm aiming for string number 3, fingertip is touching string number 4 slightly. Below my index is muting string number 2. Not really fretting it, but muting it. So everything is covered. So it's all about the position of your index, kind of flat, and the palm of your right hand should kind of rest as an extra precaution so that the lower strings are not being brought out when you want. So that's how.
Okay, from Jeff Mackey, do you have any general advice on how to use a looper? I have one, but I always seem to mess up the timing.
Yeah, so and that happens to me too. Wear the right shoes, definitely. I came here with snow boots. It didn't work. I had to take them off. And now I'm pressing with my socks and it doesn't quite work. So wear the right shoes. That definitely helps. And start with simple things like maybe not even a chord, but simple parts like single notes, and internalize the rhythm. So if this is my rhythm, don't make your loop too long. Maybe I'd say 4 beats. And internally, I'm singing a subdivision, like 16th notes. If I only had this, It's too much space between each hits. But if I have da, 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 I've got virtually hits that are helping me stay more in tempo, and then start with single note. And see how that loops, if that loops well or not. Don't worry about overdubbing anything. Just one single idea. And then delete it and try another one. And then check yourself. And then the last tip is to actually start playing before you press the loop thing, so that you're not pressing and playing right away, but you start playing the loop, and once you feel that what you're playing is making sense, once you feel that you can loop it, it's hard to talk at the same time. Once you feel that you can loop it on your own, just catch the beginning and the end. And that worked. And so forth. So those are my tips. Write shoes and start playing before you actually press the button, and make your loop as you're looping yourself.
Okay, here's one from James Nichols. Why does a minor scale work over a major chord, but a major scale doesn't work over a minor scale?
It's a good question. I've heard a lot of different theories on this. And I don't know. I don't know. But I think it has to do with the culture of hearing that over and over. If you hear something enough, it starts to sound good. And I think the historical reason, it has to do with the tempered scale. But I can't really get into it because I need to read more about it, and I'm going to start making things up, which I've been doing since the beginning of the... No, I'm joking. Yeah, I don't know. Looks like we have something important.
Yeah. So on that, this harkens back to like my theory days back in college or whatever. But some of this comes from what's known as the Picardy third. And so if you have a minor, a song or something that you're playing that's in a minor tonality, in the, not necessarily the Baroque periods, but the classical periods, what would happen is that it was almost seen as rude to end your song on a minor, like with a minor tonic, so having the minor third. So the Picardy third in that situation raises the third so that you end on a major tonic. And that same thing is applied throughout the scales. If you have a minor scale, so you're talking about, whether it's a natural minor or whatever, what would happen is on the fifth chords, they would actually raise the third there as well. And so because of that, it's not necessarily that it's quote unquote wrong going the opposite way. We've just been kind of socialized to say that that's an acceptable tone versus the other way around.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So historically, that's what kind of influenced all that. Thanks.
Was Jason, our musical encyclopedia. Okay, lucdabloozeman asks, David, when you start working on a solo, is there a difference in the way you approach it, if it's a creation of yours or a cover solo?
Well, it depends what you mean by a cover. If the cover means that I need to play note per note what the cover calls for, then yeah, it's definitely different. It has to do with learning all the notes and all that. But let's assume that it's I need to improvise something. In that case, the approach is exactly the same. And my approach has always been, not always actually, but since the last 10 years has been to put the guitar down and just listen to the part and sing over it. And that'll generate some themes that are not strictly directed by your scale knowledge or your habits, and it's usually closer to who I want to be musically. So sing it first, and then grab your guitar and reproduce that melody. So you don't necessarily, when I try to work on a solo, I don't really know the key until I make connections with my fingers. I don't even need to know the chords. I just sing over it, and something usually interesting comes about. But that's the approach. Just sing and then grab your guitar and reproduce that.
Okay. I've noticed everyone is using straps even though they are sitting. Is it supposed to be better for your posture?
No, I think for me it's just habit. Yeah, just habit. I don't know.
Okay.
Good question.
Yeah. Okay, from Fred. After learning the pentatonic scale, which scale should you learn next?
It depends on the style of music that you're into. But for me, what's been the most beneficial was, well, when you say pentatonic scale, I'd say major pentatonic and minor pentatonic. And then I would add to those the notes that make the minor pentatonic Dorian and the major pentatonic Mixolydian, because of the style of music that I've been exposed to, mostly rock, blues, funk, that kind of thing. Those are the scales that I would probably suggest you learn. Dorian, which is a minor scale, and Mixolydian, which is a major scale.
Okay. I think maybe one more question, then do our giveaway.
Let's do one more question.
Okay.
Here's one from Phil. I find myself stuck on pentatonic, major, and minor blues scales. Is Mixolydian the one I should work to infuse?
Yeah, so same, Mixolydian and Dorian. They kind of go together. They're kind of bluesy, kind of funky, and they work in 90% of the times on the, if you go to a jam band session, a blues jam band or whatever, that's going to work. Dorian is, again, kind of funk, this is the Dorian mode. And Mixolydian is the major version, if you will. But yeah, Mixolydian and Dorian would be my suggestions for you.
All right, so let's take a quick break, and Jason will do our giveaway.
Am I unmuted? Yep. Looks like it. All right, so it is that time again. It's about time to give away another guitar. David, do you want to grab that so we can show it? I don't know. I don't know the actual model number on this, but it is a beautiful rustic-looking Ibanez hollow body.
Yeah, it's definitely rustic-looking.
So if you haven't yet, everybody, refresh your browser so that your feed is as close to live as possible.
It looks rustic because we dug it out of a dumpster.
That's what I thought.
Yes, Jeff says.
It's not a fake ware.
Yeah, it's not fakeware. We actually found it in the dumpster at Spotlight Music. I'm not sure why they threw it away, but yeah, so that's why it looks like that apparently.
That's where you guys get your instructors too, right?
All right, so I know you guys are tired of hearing about it, but I have to give you the whole details. So what will happen is that in a few seconds here, I will post the winner in the chat, and I will actually announce it live as well. That winner will have 2 minutes to respond that they are here and that they live within the U.S., Canada, or Mexico. If they live outside of there, we'll be giving them a $100 gift card. But to win the guitars, you must be in North America. So I'm going to ask everybody to please go quiet in the chat room. That way we can get the winner notified and everybody can see it. So we'll wait on that for a second here, and I will go ahead and get started on posting this. And again, you'll have 2 minutes. If after 2 minutes we haven't seen a response, we will move on to the alternates that have been picked at random as well. So, here we go. Oh, and of course it gives me this. Okay, let's see here. Hold on. All right. Congratulations, Tim Beaty. You're the winner of the Ibanez guitar. Tim Beaty. Please respond within 2 minutes to let us know that you're here and where you're at. Tim Beaty. Yes, Tim Beaty is here and in Georgia. Excellent. Tim, congratulations on winning that beautiful Ibanez. Please email us at support@jamplay.com with your full name, your shipping address, and your phone number. Thanks and congrats. Let's get back to a couple questions here.
Can I pop in here for a second?
Yeah, what do you
Dave,
need?
do you want to hang around a little while longer?
Yeah.
We can do a group Q&A.
Okay.
We'll do that instead of Chris's lesson because we have literally infinite questions.
Sounds good.
Okay, you guys can just start popping in there while Dave answers some questions now.
So, speaking of Tim Beaty, here's his question. Any quick tips on how to make your pentatonic scales not sound boring?
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed your question. I just saw it on the screen.
Yep. There's any quick tips on how to make your pentatonic scales not sound boring?
Yeah. Here, let me switch to my guitar. There are several ones, but one that is very simple to put into place is to actually bend from outside. So if you have a B minor pentatonic, every note can be bended to from a half step below. So in essence, it's almost like you have your B minor pentatonic position, you're visualizing a B flat minor pentatonic, and all these notes are half bended. So it sounds like the B minor pentatonic, but some notes are outside and coming in. So obviously you're not going to play the whole thing like that, but if you incorporate that to your licks, it can sound kind of interesting. That kind of thing. So that's a quick idea that you can take and try to make something out of it.